back. We're continuing our James series today. It's going to be pretty short this week because sometimes actually all you need to do is read the passage in the Bible and then just go do it. Sometimes we overcomplicate things and think that, you know, there's hidden depth and hidden meaning in everything in the Bible. And a lot of the times there is when you really start to think about it. But sometimes it's really plain and straightforward and simple. And this is kind of what the passage is today. So I'm going to read it and then we'll just spend like 2 or 3 minutes having a look at it. But really just let these words sink in, because that's kind of all you need to hear. And it's entitled Faith and Deeds. What good is it, my brothers, if a man claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save him? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to him, "Go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed," but does nothing about his physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead. He goes on to say some other stuff about it, but essentially that's the crux of the matter. And really what James is saying here is what you believe will change what you do. And maybe if your beliefs so far haven't changed what you do, then maybe it's time to question your beliefs, question the strength of your beliefs, whether that's belief in God, whether that's belief in Jesus as Christians would say, or whether it's belief in anything else. You know, we can believe that, I don't know, we can believe that fairies live in the woodlands. You know, people do, that's cool. But if it doesn't change what we do, what's the point of our faith? And that's really what James is saying here today. Because we talk about faith to start off with as if it's all about us. And to begin with, it is all about us. You can't come into having a personal relationship with Jesus unless it's about you. Unless it's about you to start off with, and what you believe and what you've heard and what you've read and what you've understood and what you've decided to do with with the information that you've gathered. And so we can't possibly come into that initial relationship with Jesus apart from it being all about us. There's nobody else. Your husband can't get you to heaven. The heroes of the faith, the people that we, you know, look up to, and all of those types of things. Then they're not gonna get our relationship with Jesus going. That's down to us. So to start off with, it is all about us. But it goes on from there and it moves on from there. And it's quite interesting. I did a little quick study, a little quick Google on what Jesus spoke about most when he was here on earth. And different people say different things. But in essence, to start off with, the first thing that he spoke about most was God and heaven and hell, and setting out those fundamentals of faith, that we have to have a belief in God, that there is going to be a heaven one day, and then there is going to be an alternative existence for those that don't believe in God, and those things that relate directly to ourselves and to our own personal faith and belief in Jesus. So Jesus spent a lot of time talking about that. But then after he finished talking about God and heaven and hell, he then goes on. The next thing he says is make disciples and pray and believe and all of those kinds of things. When and instantly it starts being not just about us anymore, but Jesus's second priority overall is for us to start looking at those around us and start seeing what we can do to change the lives of those around us. You know, make disciples is a big thing. And that's the after we've sorted ourselves out, Jesus is saying, then the first thing you need to do is go start looking for other people. And after he talks about making disciples, the next thing is, again, this outpouring of us entering into the world and making our faith happen in action. So he starts talking about having love, having compassion, and your deeds, as James was saying here, what you do. Really, really quickly, if we have faith in Jesus, Jesus is expecting the outpouring of that faith to be put into action, to have action behind it. Jesus isn't expecting us ever just to sit on our own personal faith that we do start with, but Jesus isn't ever expecting us to sit on our own personal faith for our own personal benefit and do nothing with it. Because as James says, well, if that's what the situation that you're in, I would question how much your faith is changing you. And that's the thing, we can change. We think that we can't change. We say things like, oh, it's just how I am. It might be how you are now, but it doesn't have to be how you are in the future, I think is what Jesus would be saying. So 2 things for us to be praying for this week. And the first one is that we would so encounter Jesus in our personal lives that our hearts would overflow with compassion for those around us. Jesus's heart overflowed with compassion. We're meant to be like Jesus. If we don't at the moment feel such sorrow for people that we see that are in hideous situations, especially at the moment, but throughout the centuries as well, and throughout, our neighbours, right through to those at the other end of the world, if our hearts aren't flowing with compassion for them, if our hearts aren't broken by what we see, then maybe we need to pray that our hearts would be broken so that we can change, because we can. Because if we say that we can't change, then what we're saying is actually, God, you're not powerful enough. And then the second thing for us to pray about, if we don't know, what are my deeds? Jesus, what are the things that you want me to do? And that could just be as simple as dealing with what's in front of you. We don't have to look very far down our street before we would find somebody that would be benefited by something that we could do. So those 2 things, Lord, give me a heart of compassion. And then, Lord, what are my deeds? What do you want me to do with this? This passage is really simple, but if we're serious about it, we need to be looking at stuff like that and just go do it. At the end of this passage that James talks about, that James is putting in this chapter of his book, I suppose he didn't know there were chapters, but in this chapter of his book entitled Faith and Deeds, he talks about Rahab. And Rahab was an amazing woman in the Old Testament. And Rahab's story is that she worked in an inn. She was kind of associated with a pub, and lots of men used to come to the pub, and it's indicated that her occupation in the pub was as a sex worker. And I'm guessing potentially at that time, who knows, it might have been a choice that she made, but I'm guessing that probably at that time it was more out of a requirement of others than it necessarily was of her choice to take up that occupation. And so she was in a pretty rough place. And then a couple of Israelite spies came to her town. And the Israelites, Moses had led the Israelites out of Egypt, out of slavery, and they were looking for somewhere to live. They were looking to continue their journey with God, and they needed to come into this town where Rahab lived. And so they sent a couple of spies to seek it out and see what the town's defences were like and that sort of thing. But the Egyptians were looking for them. They knew they'd come, and the Egyptians were looking for them. And Rahab has this encounter with God's people. And through God's people, that make disciples thing again, through God's people, she has an encounter with God, and she chooses at great personal cost to herself to hide these spies in her house until the danger's passed, and tells the Egyptians that they're not there. And through that encounter, because she encountered God and then did something about it, her whole household was saved, her family was saved. She ended up being married to one of the Israelites, and actually then appears in the ancestry, in the genealogy that leads straight to Jesus's birth on earth. You know, if you think you can't change, if you've been here before trying to maybe have a heart that's more compassionate, or thinking about going and doing something for somebody else, or thinking really I shouldn't be just sitting here and reveling in my own personal faith, but I should be getting out there and doing some more. If those things have touched you before, but you think I can't change, look at Rahab. And she's only one example, you know. The Bible and history is full of people that encountered Jesus and then went on to do as a direct result of what Jesus has done for them. I hope that's given us some food for thought as we march through Holy Week to the most amazing celebration time in the Christian calendar. And I pray that God would richly bless you this week. Take care.